8 years of writing matched in 1 month. Melody is a partner at NextView Ventures who built an AI writing system that fits how she thinks. She shows us her judgment ledger where every AI mistake becomes a lesson and often a post. She walks through a morning run that wrote a draft and ran 6 editor agents while she was away from her computer. And 90% of her time still goes to deciding what is worth writing. The ideas were always there. Now the output keeps up.
Melody, you are a partner at a venture fund, and separately from your day job, you've managed to build one of the more complete AI systems that we have come across. Give us a 30-second rundown of who you are and what the system does for you.
Sure. I'm Melody Ko, partner at NextView Ventures. We're early stage venture fund, mostly focused on the U.S. pre-seed, seed stage companies. And what does the thing do for me? It's kind of like a daily operating system that I do, coding, building products for our internal use, and all sorts of stuff that you think is like knowledge work task. And one of the more quote unquote complete workflow and system is really focused on writing. And I think writing is part of my job as an investor to kind of put thoughts out there and engage with founders. But I do a lot of other stuff with it too.
So this is specifically to post on social media and your newsletter.
Yeah. So how this got started, a lot of venture investors write, and I've never been I have a lot of thoughts, but I've never been really good at putting thoughts on paper. And that, I think just takes me a long time. I have a partner, he's very, very good and very fast at writing. And I historically was very frustrated with my inability to write very fast and capture my thoughts. But then I realized when I'm in conversations with founders or other people, I'll be repeating the same thing. I was like, can I just write this so I don't have to repeat myself 5 times, because I have thoughts that are very structured in my head. So around January or February time, that this is my realization. I'm I can actually leverage AI to build a system that suits my strength and fill my weaknesses so that I can get my thoughts out there. Initially, really, it's just ideas that, I should maybe start a newsletter and document some of my thoughts as it relates to working with AI pretty hands-on. Even though I'm, an investment partner, I do a lot of work around how to really codify our judgment and rethink how venture capital should be done with AI. So I on average, spend a lot of time building compared to probably most other investors.
So before using AI, right? How long did it take you to actually get something out?
Oh, yeah. If you look at my writing history in public, which you can just point an agent at it, and I think in my first 8 years as an investor, I wrote the same amount of stuff that I wrote in the first month this year. So that just tells you the throughput difference. And I think historically, I'll have a thought and I procrastinate because I don't really like the ideation part. And so it just take me forever. And then I have to spend all day. And I'm one of those writers, if I actually write by hand, I'll write a sentence and I go back and try to fix it. And as opposed to just put it down and it flows. So as a result, I didn't really write too much. And it was really painful. But when I finally finished, I'll be like, oh yeah, this is good. I can, as a mechanism for communicating with founders in the outside world. But unfortunately, I just couldn't do it at a high velocity or enough of a velocity that's matching to the ideas that I have. So
that's amazing. In fact, I want to double click on the one word that you mentioned earlier, judgment, right? You actually designed your system to do judgment compounding, and you say that content is only secondary. That's very interesting to hear. Can you explain it to me? I'm a founder who's never heard about it, because that sounds very interesting.
Right. Okay. So in January or February, I basically built a first skill for Claude Code. So I use Claude Code, but it's it's basically a format that other agents, codecs and such can use. It essentially encapsulates a repeatable process that you want to run again and again. And that skill was called learning loop. And the reason I built the skill was because I feel like I was correcting Claude's mistakes all the time, session by session. And because every session, the agent just has no memory unless it reads all the documents that you give to the agent. I was like, I'm just like wasting my time. Why am I correcting your mistakes all the time, but then we're not documenting them? So we need to design a process to document our learnings. So that's what the learning loop was. And with that came with this concept of is an internal markdown file that I have called a judgment ledger. Because what the skill does is essentially like, oh, look through all the conversations that we had in this session. And is it pick out the mistakes or the struggles or the debate that me and Claude had, or any agent, and figure out, is this like a code level mistake that needs to be documented as a solution next time we write code, which is like a very classic engineering thing, or is it the process level mistake that needs to be documented in agents MD or Claude MD or reference files, so the next time Claude reads it can potentially become a judgment that gets recorded. And the byproduct of that is like, oh, that's probably interesting writing material. So the first couple months of my writing, actually, a lot of it was a product of these judgment ledger entries that we recorded after. It's like a retrospective of the work that we did. We meaning me and AI. and then that also so happened to be like a lot of my reflection of like how agents operate, how we operate, So then a lot of that became writing materials. So that's what I meant by like writing became a byproduct of the judgment that compounds. And over time, the system got smarter because we're just, correcting on the edges, and we're not starting from scratch every time.
That's amazing. In the sense that you said you mentioned correcting on the edges, right? Like there's a whole third layer where you are generating content out of the process itself. Like agent and you are co-learning. And that also becomes further writing material. It's almost like the process is generative of new content, new insights. Fascinating. That's like high quality systems thinking.
That's so I would say the source of all the posts. I've probably written like 20 posts on Substack. It's called Ground Truth. And initially, I would say probably the first 10 posts, maybe like 80% of those ideas came from the judgment ledger with this compounding process. Wow. As time went on, the percentage become less of that because the aha become less frequent, which is a good thing because we've talked about and learned a lot of the stuff already. So the judgment ledger is not the only source of the writing ideas. The second most important or equally important is I'll be walking around all day, talking to a founder or meet a company or, in shower, and I'll just be reflecting and I'll think of something. And I also build a system separately on my phone, which basically, I'll be like reading an X article, like, oh, this is related to what I was thinking about the other day. And these two things together is like a kernel for something else. Potentially we should explore writing about this or at least investigate. And so a lot of times you're on the go, you don't have more than like 5 minutes to even prosecute this with the agent. So I basically have a process I call like inbox capture that just sends on my, on my phone, that basically is an iOS shortcut, connect to a GitHub with the PAT token, which is basically an authentication token to your repo to write it in. And it runs like a cloud routine every day at 5 p.m. for the cloud agent to investigate across all my repos based on what I instructed to do. And then it gives me a summary on Telegram with a separate agent to process when I have time. So I also have like a process to capture things on the go that gets into the judgment ledger in multiple directions. So then when I actually sit down to like run, I would call content editors, like, hey, look through what's happening with markets with regards to tech and AI and give me a summary of like, what's your recommendation? And there's a lot of other stuff that we check to give me a recommendation of what might be the next best topic to pick up this week. Yeah.
Okay. So one thought, right? Typically a piece of content does well when you have a differentiated viewpoint, or people say hot take. But are you saying that, these judgments are what makes like a differentiated viewpoint?
Yes and no. The things that get recorded in judgment ledgers are like kernels of thoughts. So I'll give you like two examples. One came from the system compounding literally 2 days ago. And I can show the judgment ledger if people are interested, but like I can just talk through it. because it's just a markdown file.
Yeah.
One literally came yesterday, and Opus 5 launched. Along with it, there's being like 3 versions of Claude Code updates, because every time they launch a new model, they tune the harness, try to make sure, the system prompts change just a little bit, meaning what is the out-of-the-box factory version of how to instruct the agent to do what. And then we found out that a lot of my guardrails and my addition on top of the factory version stopped working, because there's literally a sentence in the system prompt that says, do not launch agent tools unless explicitly told. And then so a lot of the stuff that I was used to literally with 4.8 was not happening in session. And I was watching it. So we ran a learning loop. We're like, what the heck happened? Why was this not good? And I was like, did Anthropic change anything in the harness? So the long story very short was like, we went from like, there's something not working to running a learning loop. And then I was doing an investigation. And then we start talking about the reason why Anthropic did that and what is happening, because the instruction was available for Opus 5, but not Fable 5. And then it became a workshop judgment ledger. I was like, okay, here's probably like the 3 reasons why Anthropic did this. And here's how it connects to my other thought the other day we logged 3 days ago about, in order to bring the mass market to the true power of agents, the labs might have to do a lot of work to make it dead simple, not for people like me, but dead simple for people who don't write Claude MDs and have sophisticated systems to know how to use it. And this might be why they did that.
Yeah.
So this became another kernel that we might explore in a couple of weeks. But this literally came from like, something seems broke, we investigated, I sent Claude off to like read the release notes and the system binary to figure out what happened with the harness. And then we're like, okay, now this needs more work to get to a post. It might not even be good, but this got recorded. I was like, I'll write all the stuff down. We'll come back and investigate in a couple of weeks if we run content editor next time. So that's an example of like how
but it's an
something
insight,
gets
right?
into it. Right. But like in order to like actually came to that, right, I did the work to probe with the questions, right? I sent agents to go figure out. And then I was like, oh, here's my hypothesis. Here's why it's connected to the macro about like token spends and justification of token spends with ROI in workforces and yada, yada, yada.
Can you show from the start, like you had a thought, and how did it start from there and get to where it finally publishing?
Right. Okay. So let's just start here. So this is a document called Judgment Ledger, which I talked about, and I'm just gonna show it real quick to see how something gets into the Judgment Ledger. By the way, AI writes this, I don't, but I give it, right? Like, so this is an incident that we talked about. So, here's what happened. Opus 5 shipped and XYZ broke, and we're investigating, and there's like a realization. And then me workshopping with Claude to be like, okay, this might be the content kernel, potentially a direct follow-up to this post in the meantime that I wrote. But this is just at like super draft stage. And you can see this thing is like very, very long because it's like dated. This is from another conversation I had during the week. That's another idea. So these are just examples of this. This is actually a post I'm currently writing. So this idea was an idea kernel. I literally was like in the shower. I was like, oh, we should write a post about 1 year reflection. And then I workshopped with my Telegram version of Claude Code, which sits on a separate computer, so it's always on. And then we're like, oh yeah, it's not gonna be good if it's just like a listicle, but it has to be interesting in XYZ way. Here needs to be an angle, and I have some ideas of like, oh, here's might be the format. And you'll see like it took forever to like get to a final post, but this is like an example of Judgment Ledger. Okay, so now you have a bunch of stuff in Judgment Ledger. This is let me just scroll to the top. So this was the content editor run. So I came in, new session. The beginning of the message got clipped, but basically I said, okay, I need to run content editor. Today's Friday. I need to figure out what to write next. So you can see Claude working, and at the very high level, what content editor is supposed to be doing is figure out what's being talked about in market. We have a particular markdown file called Market Pulse. I have a separate process that forwards interesting, relevant either like AI newsletters or VC newsletters or tech newsletters into a separate Gmail inbox. By the way, this might not be the most token efficient way to handle it, but I will, figure it out later. Assuming token is not a constraint, this is pretty, very much fine. And then it's checking so I have two types of check to see what has other people been talking about. So that we either figure out, is there something that is worth the moment or overly saturated, so you don't want to go there. Or that even if it's saturated, you kind of have to here's the angle that you need to go if you really want to go there. So there's a newsletter research, and then there's a social signal check. This is someone else built a skill called last 30 days. So I use it, connects with the API to be able to figure out what's going on X for the last 30 days, very high level, and Reddit and things like that. So see, this is the skill doing its work, and there's sometimes flag operational things and just updating some of my documents, and then it's telling me what's happening. Oh, running the check. See, this is the last 30 day of the top 3 likely developed now candidates. Just checking against all the other sources that we have. And then gives you a summary. Here's a social signal summary. But I don't read any of this stuff until everything is done. So Market Pulse. So this is basically it tries to keep a rolling past 6 months of what's happening with the market. So it's the document doesn't get crazy long. But this, because I haven't run it for a while, I was on vacation. So it's processing 400 emails, newsletter emails, and we can scroll through all that. It's just document editing of the Market Pulse. Okay, here. Content editor assessment. So tell you all the candidates we evaluated that's being judgment ledger, Market Pulse updated, editorial calendar, and then ran the social signal check. And it tells me here's the 3 ideas that we have in the JL's judgment ledger. What are the things that it recommend me writing now versus waiting for hook or is very crowded? And, we also have this check called portfolio balance. By the way, a lot of these stuff is get added over time because we run into something I don't like, and then we learning loop correct. So portfolio balance means look back at X number of posts. We need to have kind of a broad-based appeal and deeper topics. If it's all nerd deep, it's not very broadly applicable to people, but it's all broad, there's no thesis. So that's another thing it checks. So it checks a lot of things. What it also checks, here's my ICP, yada, yada. So then, we check against the calendar, and then it's basically telling me, then we go into this conversation that I said something, because I saw it coming up with a reason, about the output proxy trap. And I was like, okay, let me give you some other context. So here's just deliberation. So here's the stuff that I'm workshopping a lot with Claude to figure out, pick one. So then we have the next step, which is called outline production. So at this point, I was like, okay, fine, let's go with output proxy trap. And we're going to run outline production, which means from my learning, I didn't used to have the outline stage, and I would go in straight to have Claude write a post. And I was and it would do 3 and 4 revs. And I was this is not the right thesis. We don't have the thesis locked. This is not good. And then we had to walk all the way back to completely rework what the post is even about. This sounds very obvious in retrospect, but when you're just with AI, you're oh, why don't you just go and show me what you got? And then what you got a lot of times is not very good without very strong instructions. And I think you have a question somewhere in your prep notes, say which part is AI good at, which part is AI not very good. What is not very good, and I spend 90% of my time doing this, is I have to workshop the kernel. I have to workshop what is actually, so we can skip all this, what is actually worth writing. And so a lot of this, we can skip the interim messaging, because a lot of this is really just me reading feedback. So now I ran learning the wrap up, and we can jump to the next. But we got to a point, these are all committed, okay, here. I was I want to start a fresh session because your context is very full. and polluted and all that. So I was like, give me a prompt to start a new session, to actually do the outline. And then here the following, I'm doing wrap up, which is just for fun. Here's like all the mistakes that happened. Here's how we should document it. And I think there was an earlier question asking me about like, here's like a printout of a receipt of all the mistakes and where the fixes went in terms of our documentation. Then we go into, then this is a new session after that, and say, you know, I basically was like, I did a content editor run and try to work on an outline, and I feel like we didn't go anywhere. And I need to like redo this whole thing. I need to really think about what we should be writing. And then we keep going. And then there's a separate outline section, and we can, you know, I can pause here, but I'm sure you guys have questions.
Yes, I do. So the first thing, right, especially going back to the whole judgment thing, it seems like it has a lot of steps, and some of the things that you all implemented, right, these are things that I've learned very recently. Like, okay, one simple thing, like you have to have a pulse of the market, right? Like what people are talking about, and then when you have a point of view which is very differentiated and adding to it, then it takes off. Like, I mean, Satya Nadella's post on token capital versus human capital was one real good example. So you have all this figured out in the judgment layer. So what was the thinking behind the system behind that judgment layer? How long did you take for you to come up with that?
Yes, very iterative, very iterative. So in the very first iteration of this, there were no skills built. In the content lab repo, all I had was, I was like, oh, let's just like do some research on what works on Substack, what works on X, what works on LinkedIn. So I sent out a bunch of agents to do research and wrote what we call like channel playbooks. Like here's the X playbook, and here's the LinkedIn playbook, and then here's like the Substack playbook. And then I was like, okay, then we need definition of like the content wedge, like at least for the Substack publication, like what do we need? Who are we talking to? So that was it. That was the very, very beginning. And then I think the very first skill that was built, it was the content editor. But then how everything actually gets built is through the learning loop reflection. Because I get angry at it making mistakes or doing stuff that doesn't make sense or doing stuff that I said it should not be repeating itself. And then we'll go through the learning loop wrap up. And then I was like, okay, so how do we fix this? How do we not make this happen next time? And Claude was like, oh yeah, we need to add the standard into the content development standard. So we had this long document for a while. That's like, here's the content development standard. Literally is like 10 steps of how you write a post. And as you guys might know, if you work with AI agents a lot, the number one frustration point is called not following rules under task momentum. And as people, I wrote a post about this recently, it's like the wrapping of the unpredictable genius. So basically you start with like no instructions and you put a bunch of stuff in Claude MD, and then you're like, actually, that doesn't even cut it. Let's build skills to try to scaffold the 10 steps you need to follow. And sometimes it still decides to skip. And then eventually you realize that, oh, the only thing that can stop it from just making its own YOLO judgment is to build some hooks of things that you really care about, because that's deterministic. But to answer your question, right, like all of this stuff is iterative, and, you know, going back to the content development standard Markdown, because it was so long. It was like 10 steps. We already know what the steps are. You write the thing, and then you run this skill called editorial review, which we then build, which reviews for accuracy, for ICP, have adversarial agents as founders, VCs, operators to like read the thing cold, check references and make sure it doesn't make anything up. So all these are like mechanical steps that we designed, that we got to, because that's the revs we took to get there. I think stylistically speaking, I have my partner Rob, who's a very good writer. He took a look at the repo, the public version, and it doesn't really fit how he thinks, like where his ideas come from, how he liked to process ideas. So he doesn't really he like borrowed like one or two ideas from me, but then he doesn't really use it out of the box, because it is very fine-tuned to how I'd like to work. I'm scaffolding things so that it elevates my strength, but then kind of cover my weaknesses. My weaknesses, one of which is like I don't actually literally like to type word by word because that just takes me forever. But to make sure it doesn't sound AI, right? It sounds like me. I obviously have like voice profiles I established, and then there's a step. We can't show it right now, but like there's a step that's we build a skill called, you know, basically like capture. When AI drafts it to get to like 90% good, I take it over and do hand editing. And then we run a process, which is a mini version of a learning loop, which is like grip all the difference, the delta between my edits and your edits, synthesize and reflect which of these should go back into the content editorial standards or voice.
Yeah.
Check. So that body of work grows as well. So hopefully I do less of this editing. I always do editing, right? Because there's always things that come up. So that's another gap that we closed over time. But initially we didn't have that skill either. Yeah.
Nice. So you said that the writing is done. Would love to see the output. And also there is a different version for the newsletter, X, LinkedIn, etc.
Right.
So how does that work?
Yes. So just for the audience. So this basically, this whole session this is this morning. Last night, I finally got to a draft outline that I liked enough. So this morning, this is called produce post. So this is a skill that bundled a bunch of steps. And I just see real time what it did. And also I have permission level. I use auto mode, but I have a lot of permissions that I hand crafted that are like dangerous or not dangerous. And most of the time just kind of can't go without me babysitting. So it's easy what it's doing. Okay, ground itself with all the standards, calendars, visual styles, yada, yada. Check the date. Just a sidebar. AI is really bad at date of the week. So the way I do it is like, here's my hack. I don't know what you guys' hack. I make it build a grid, like a visual grid of the calendar for every month in code. And then it needs to, because it can grab the system date, but it cannot grab the day of the week. So I make it build a calendar for every month and then force it to check that what is the July 27 lineup as a grid. It's Monday. Anyway, so that has worked since then. So then it's, okay, it read the outline. Basically, it's going to read the outline. And then part of the standard makes sure that it reads the last 3 posts that we published live. Because I have had incidents where it would read the close to final draft in the markdown. It would not use the right language, which is the whole point of me editing the language. So now there's a mandatory thing that you need to write. You need to read the last 3 live posts. So it's using Playwright to open the browser, to read it, screenshot it, make sure I actually read it. And then now he's writing the draft. And then the draft is written. Now the next step, editorial review. By the way, I was not in front of my computer the whole time. I was doing something else. This is this morning. And so it runs editorial review, checks me 0 M dashes, but it's too long because AI always writes too long, and starts cutting so we can skip all the edits. But then see, this is like, oh, only 115 words cut. Well, not good enough. And then it's doing a bunch of other edits, trim to about that. By the way, if I need to change this actually, like if you set a 2,000 word ceiling, it will not go to 1,500 words. So like it will use a number this is like one of our learnings. So you need to be very aggressive or not throw any numbers out at all because it will latch on that as like the go post. That doesn't make sense. Okay, now it's doing the editorial agents. So these are the 6 agents we've developed over time agents basically just a markdown file, right? So like we're checking for accuracy and claims because a lot of times it will make up citations and it'll tell me it did research, that doesn't make sense, it's not the right thing. Voice and language, audience and platform, AI pattern detection, readability and plain, because I was like, I need plain English. I do not want very technical. So it tends to write very technical because of the topics, voice fidelity. So these are over time things that we built in because of the frustration from previous one. Okay, so round 1 did round 1. And then it did round 2. and then converge. P1 is like priority one. What are the things that actually needs to fix? And then when to fix them. Again, this is all just running in background. Good. Now it's shorter. And now it's doing cover, because part of the things we decided is that let's decide all the judgment level directions I can give. So part of it is like, what is like the direction of the cover for this post? What is like, and then you'll see. So now it's doing the Gemini thing to review the cover, and it's writing code to generate a cover, yada yada. Okay, so now updating editorial calendar because we need to keep track of our records. Oh, this is now and the review loop, verification. Okay, cover 3 candidates. I need to review what they made. Sometimes it's pretty good one shot. Sometimes it'd be like, this is completely garbage. And I have to, so back to like what I need to do versus what AI needs to do. I think initially I thought like, oh, I can just be like, hey, read the post and come up with ideas and go make them. Half the time it's really bad. And I have to be like, I have to create a scene. I'm like, oh, how about this? And then it will get it. Like, so it obviously needs human direction to be very good. Otherwise, it's like the taste is bad. But this is, I mean, again, this is like not earth-shattering news. Like, people who use AI would know. Like, so I don't know if the post is any good. We don't have to read it live, but like, this is basically what it wrote. So we usually start with the canonical channel, which is Substack. And part of the, then like on LinkedIn, we need to work on, the only thing we now do is like work on the hook. Because the difference between LinkedIn and Substack is that LinkedIn doesn't have a title. Like Substack has a title, LinkedIn doesn't have a title. So we need to remember that there's no title and subtitle carrying the post. And LinkedIn, my personal judgment and realization is like, it needs to be much shorter. So it's usually like a TLDR version of the full thing. But a lot of this, we also run a step post. It's called like performance capture. It basically goes to the browser, checks into, basically use my logged in session, supervised, to just like grab all the CSVs and metrics and dashboards. I used to do this by hand. And one day I was like, why am I doing this by hand? Like I used to take all the screenshots and dump it into a folder. And I was like, this is wasting too much of my time. So I just built a skill, like just use Claude and Chrome and get into my browsers, grab the CSVs. Here's all the docs you need to grab. Here's all the metrics you need to log. And then have an analyst step that tells me what are the actionable learnings. I don't want reporting of like the metrics. I want actionable learnings. And then again, that skill got iterated over time. Now I just like kick it off and I go do something else. So that's why I have like 6 to 10 tabs going on at the same time.
That's effectively one more layer automated away, right? Like, but you mentioned how you do the final edit. Now that's a layer of human intervention, right?
Yeah.
Which other parts have you not delegated? Like, you're keeping it to yourselves.
I mean, the ideation, the workshopping, that's like the most important thing, is like getting to a post kernel that I think is actually good and holding the standards pretty high. And then just the angles. Hard to explain. What's a good example of this? Like use this particular post, right? Like, oh, the kernel initially started, as you saw in the judgment ledger a little bit. It's like, oh, it's 1 year anniversary of me starting using Claude Code. It'd be kind of interesting to write something that's like the walkabout of the key moments and how those key moments changed the way I think about AI and AI in work, or even AI in our line of work, or like what was I constantly surprised by. So that's like the initial, like unworkshopped version. But to get to this, I had to spend a lot of time and stress testing it with Claude. I'm like, each moment needs to have its own takeaway. And then Claude at one point was trying to force me into like, oh, your own standard says that every post needs to have a thesis. What is the thesis that's carrying this post? I was like, I think this post is actually different. This is an exception because I'm envisioning like a chronological timeline over the past year, and then there are like some key moments that we highlight and tell little stories. So each moment is actually its own little learning. So I had to make the executive decision of like, this is not one of those posts that needs to have one unifying thesis. If anything, the unifying theme is that what was I constantly surprised by? And then the implicit feeling that we want is, oh, the speed of which is like that things change was probably another layer of the meta surprise over the past year. But that has to come from me. Like it can't work at that level. I mean, caveat though, like I was using Opus 5, not Fable 5. But I don't actually think I've done Fable 5 work with some other stuff, work, and that is I don't think it's at that level yet. So like the meta, like you only have the best kind of judgment on that. And you know, and then the other example is all the way downstream, which is like the performance capture. It's like, oh, a post shipped, here's like the metrics, what happened. You would think that like, oh, if smart models have all the metrics and you understand the scaffolding objective of this machine, it should be able to at least make the accurate conclusion. Because metrics are only useful if you're going to do something about it. Like if you're going to make change. Otherwise, this is not worth the tracking. Yeah. Like, what's the point? So you would think, I think, that, oh, AI must be able to get that down and just like automatically iterate on the machine without me directing it how to do it. And it'll tell you that that's not completely true. Because it would focus, I think it's like not seeing the forest, but only the trees pattern. I think the models have gotten better at that problem, but it's not completely gone. So you still have to zoom out 10,000 foot. So I think those, and then the last example I'll give, which is a learning loop. The gist of learning loop is like read everything in a session transcript before we close that and the session transcript is lost. And pick up all the mistakes and tell me where to improve your own system. And then again, you would think like, yeah, it's going to be pretty good at that. And over time, the latest version of learning loop, which this repo is public, so if people are interested, you can check it out. But the latest version has two personas that checks this recommendation. One is basically like, is this rule meta enough? And then the other is like reverse working logic. Like if we got to walk the logic backwards, if next time Claude was trying to do this job, now with this new rule in place, in its like logical flow of how it reads Claude MD and then reference and da-da-da-da-da, would it actually stop the mistake? And half the time, these two personas would diverge from the primary agent's recommendation because the primary agent recommendation is always too narrow, almost always too narrow. And then it's not meta enough. So those are like the examples. I think it's interesting because you would think that AI is pretty good at walk back the logic in reverse order. It's not. You kind of have to explicitly instruct it to check with that lens. And then if you instruct it to check with that lens, then it can be very good.
Okay, to summarize, for sure, your output has increased significantly. You know, 1 month of output is like 8 years worth of what you've done without AI. So there's clearly an improvement there. But when it comes to improving the performance of the post itself over time with this system, I know you mentioned that AI is not really good at, you know, learning and improving. But have you been able to get better sort of maybe views, counts?
Yeah, I would say that I honestly, I think you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, I think the most important factor when it comes to kind of content performance is the content itself. It's the content idea itself.
Yeah.
Now, I will give you a counter in terms of what has the machine helped. So, I historically don't spend too much time on X. And I kind of think about like the Substack persona and LinkedIn persona to be pretty different from the X persona in terms of AI proficiency, the rabbit holing, and like, you know, all that. So, but I have limited amount of bandwidth. So I'm not like doing content full time. Like that's like one of my side, you know, that's like one of the things I do, but that's like not the main job. Right. So I've always been like, yeah, let's just like whatever we write on Substack, let's just like write a carbon copy for X article and then just put it out. And I don't spend too much time trying to like, quote unquote, like write the algorithm or promote or do what. Because if you're a full-time person, you can do that. I think there's like a lot of headroom to be smart about it. But then I had this idea. So it was organic. Like I posted something, I forgot which article it was. And then I randomly was scrolling on X. And I saw a couple people talking about something that I recently wrote. So naturally what you would do is you would chime in on a conversation and reply or quote tweet. And then that particular X post, it performed really well. So to wrap up on the story, I was like, oh, why don't we build a skill that scans, and whenever we have a target post, scan what are the relevant conversations that been happening, and then give me some candidates to engage, because I don't have time. Like I don't have time to like sit on the X tweet, the feed to like do that all the time. And but you think again, you're like, oh, that's pretty easy. I thought so too, because I was like, oh, it's not hard. It required a lot of tuning, and and now we're building the golden data set, which means like if I handpicked it, if I saw it, and I was like, this map to that post, but the AI didn't see it, that means the prompt needs work. So like you're at the way to iterate on this over time, which is like its own task. It's like, you've got to build a golden data set. You got to iterate on the prompt. So the moral of the story is but then we had a last X article, and I just like casually ran the thing, and then I found one or two interesting conversations to like kind of opine on as it relates to the post, and I posted 10x better than all the previous X articles. So it proved that it's a thing that's worth doing, but the skill itself is not as good yet, and it needs work.
Got it.
This is just about prioritization of the human bandwidth, right? Because the AI is not very good at, or I don't know enough to like set it up to be self-improving yet. And then the human judgment that had to come from the golden data set examples to run the green team and the red team, that still needs to be me.
Got it. Now, quick question, right? Final question. If someone was to if somebody's watching this episode, they want to set it up, what are the first quick 3 things that they have to do so that they get going?
I mean, I think my personal learning, I think the most important thing for me was just, the compounding of the learning, right? Because I think that's the fastest way to get started. Like every time you made a mistake, even if you don't use something like learning loop, you'd be like, oh, this mistake happened. How did we prevent it from happening next time? Tell me how you would change about documentation or whatever. And then you're on the next session, and then maybe you got a little better, and then a new problem. So that, because if you don't do that, I mean, by the way, like the labs are making it a little easier, right? Because of the Opus 5 stuff that I just talked about. They're apparently they're trying to make sure that people don't just like have this runaway bill of 100 concurrent agents that they unknowingly spun up. So they're trying to make it a little easier for beginners. But I think you just learn by doing. That sounds very cliche, but importantly, you have to compound the learning so that you don't redo this work all the time.
Awesome. This was great. Thank you for these wonderful insights, and you have like some insane level of systems thinking, and I hope our viewers get to implement this and experience the magic that you've created.
All right. Thank you, guys. It's a fun conversation. Yeah.